Hey everyone, this is Robert Keens with goldsilverpros.com. I have a very special guest today. It is the CEO of Blue Moon Zinc, Patrick McGrath. How are you doing today, Patrick?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me, Robert.
Well, thank you so much for joining the program today. You've got a very exciting project that I'm really interested to talk about because it's a polymetallic project out here in Western USA. So it's great that it's a USA mine, but it's also great that we have lots of different metals going on. Can you explain a little bit about your project overall and why you guys had interest in it?
Sure. So it's a VMS deposit of volcanic massive sulfide, and it's characterized as polymetallic. So as you mentioned, multiple metals in there. It's if you look at it, it's probably split in gross value between base metals, which is zinc and copper, and also on the other side is precious metals. So you have large content of gold and silver. So it's roughly half and half in terms of value of the metals in the ground, and in terms of output, it would be primarily zinc, but with obviously some great credits on the other elements.
Okay. And in terms of the zinc itself, I know zinc is used for a lot of things. It's used in batteries. It's also used in galvanizing steel. Maybe you can talk about some of the value that zinc brings to the market and why investors may be interested in taking on a zinc project.
Sure. So, I mean, I think everyone knows like the primary use of zinc is probably zinc alloy in terms of, rust proofing steel. So, I mean, in terms of, where you're seeing zinc is coming on recently, it's, there's going to be a big infrastructure spend in North America and probably around the world coming up. And zinc is a primary element that goes into steel. So that's probably what I would call the primary usage. But as you mentioned, that there is some secondary usages, including medical, including the upcoming electric battery that it's getting more and more press on, and more innovations on that side as well. I mean, zinc is the fourth most widely used metal in the world. So it's, if you're a EV battery developer, what would you rather have? One of the metals that you can freely buy on the open market and is readily available, or would you rather have a more obscure metal that you have to get out of a dangerous country?
Yeah, and that's one of the great things of having a project so close to home here for U.S. investors. And I would add to what you explained in terms of the importance of zinc. I know that as a Chinese economy, the China has basically stated they're trying to increase their middle class income by 50%. They want to go up from an average of 10,000 per person there to 15,000. In order to do that, they're going to need a tremendous amount of resources as they build out that economy. So zinc is going to be one of the key ones, along with copper and some of the other key base metals. So I think a lot of the base metals that people often overlook and maybe aren't as sexy as gold and silver, for example, are still going to be extremely important in terms of growth in the Asian sector. So I anticipate there's going to be a lot more demand over the next 5 to 10 years. Is that what you're seeing as well in your growth projections?
Yeah, and I think most analysts point to a supply-demand crunch there. There's more and more zinc projects that are coming off stream. The demand is not faltering, and it certainly looks like there's going to be a supply shortfall in, call it, the next year to 2 years. I've also seen what's gone on in terms of China is they are, on the outside, trying to show that they're becoming greener, and as a result, there's a lot of mom and pop mining operations, small scale mining operations in China that are coming off stream. So you're seeing them not be able to produce that zinc supply that they could years ago.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Also want to talk about the gold and silver there for a moment. You said about 50% of the values in gold and silver. It's really considered a byproduct. So are you going to use that in your estimations of value for the projects as byproduct credits? Or do you think that maybe some bullishness in gold and silver prices could actually help you guys out on your bottom end?
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is, those four elements, zinc, copper, gold, and silver, are all going to, hit the bottom line of this project. So what it would normally be is, what we're looking at this is probably a zinc silver concentrate and a copper gold concentrate. It'll be metallurgists that will ultimately determine it. But all those four metals are going to be revenue generators for the company. Obviously, all four metals have done very well as of late. So, that's the benefit of having a diversified portfolio, if you will, of metals. There's always going to be one that's doing well and maybe not one that's lagging a little bit, but by having all four of them and all four of them being able to sellable commodities, it's great to have.
Yeah. One of the other things that I always like to tell my subscribers is look at the jurisdiction where you're getting the mine from. Look at the political jurisdiction and also
Mhm.
the safety. And can you talk a little bit about the Western United States and what type of jurisdiction that is for the zinc project?
For sure. So, there's you put the map out there. It's in California. It's in the foothills. So it's getting close to the Nevada border. Um, what I would characterize it as, you're going past the agricultural belt and you're going into the rolling grasslands. And I'll show you a picture later on in the presentation. But it is the area that we're in is rolling grasslands. There's no agriculture in the area. It's used for occasional cattle grazing. So as a result, um, it's underutilized land. It's an area where we're not going to be competing with resources with other industries. So the other thing is the Mariposa. It's a large county by size, but very small county by population. And something like this coming on stream, done in a responsible manner, would be welcomed by the local community. It would add jobs, well-paying jobs to otherwise small job sector there. And in terms of security, what I like about land tenure in the U.S. is it's very strong. Once you can own surface and subsurface rights, and there's a well-known gentleman, Ross Beatty, who is chairman of Equinox Gold. He has two very large gold projects in California. He has one, the Mesquite, that's doing 130, 140,000 ounces a year. And he has a second one, Castle, that's coming on stream in 2021. And ultimately we do 200, 250,000 ounces. And how he describes it is California, tough to permit? Yeah, but so is every jurisdiction in North America and pretty much around the world. But once you have that project through the permitting stage, the U.S. and California are some of the best jurisdictions in the world in terms of safe jurisdictions. You know your fiscal terms. It's a safe asset once you have it up and running, and very stable.
So as you mentioned, it's getting over those initial hurdles, and once you have the permits, then it's pretty much clear sailing from that point. Do you guys have the necessary permits that you need for this project?
So this project, just to give a little background, it did have production during World War II. It was Hecla had it, and they did a smaller scale, but it was around 50,000 tons at 13% zinc. So it was a war effort project. So it does have legacy value in that it was a past producer. And it was really during the 80s and early 90s that a couple mid-tier companies, Imperial and also Boliden, did a lot of work on the project, did metallurgical work, pre-43 101 pre-feasibility work, and they advanced the project for sure. And yeah, there's a history there. So it was excellent work done by them, and we're the beneficiary of that. In today's dollar amount, the work that they did is probably worth tens of millions of dollars.
So it looks like you guys had a drill program here, 2018, 2019. Let's talk about the highlights of that and what you guys found.
Sure. So, I came in as CEO about 3 years ago, and I came in as the largest shareholder. I was a retail investor, probably like some of your listeners. And I liked the project so much, I kept accumulating to the point where I owned more shares than the past board. So I took it over. And as a result of me taking it over, we fast-tracked the Blue Moon project. We got the permits, the drill permits in place, and hence the drilling over the last couple of years. So 2018, the first real hole back into the project delivered exceptional results. We got 30 feet of 30% zinc. We had great hits for copper, almost 2% copper, almost 2 grams per ton gold and 70 grams per ton silver. I mean, even in some of those intervals, we had a couple of 5 gram per ton gold over 5 feet, so significant precious metal content in there. And this is well above deposit grade. And looks like we found a really nice high grade section in the deposit. So what we did is then there was a follow-up drill program in 2019, 2 holes, and as you can see there, holes 79 and 7080, excellent grade and width. You're talking about 25 feet of near 25% zinc, and again, high content of everything else, and the zinc equivalent around 28%. And then the hole number 80, the second one, just showing a very wide width of 64 feet of 12% zinc equivalent. So very happy. And as you can see on the very bottom line there, it's showing that it's, we can trace this mineralization for nearly 3,000 feet. So, and it remains open for expansion, particularly at depth. We're very excited about this going forward on our next drill program.
So what do you anticipate will be in your next drill program? Are you guys raising money for that, or do you already have something in mind for when you go back and maybe, are you going to do some infill drilling? Or are you going to expand out your area, or what's your approach there?
Yeah, so I think we want to do probably, we've identified three goals that we want to do in our next drill program, and it'll be in 2021. One will be just expansion of the current resource that we currently have. Two is that we think the low-hanging fruit is drilling at depth, and there's a long section in the deck there that you can see where there's been a couple holes drilled at depth that had great width and mineralization. And that's really what the previous operator, Boliden, which is one of Europe's largest base metal producers, they were going to build a shaft and just keep drilling off at depth. And we believe that strategy is intact, and that's what we believe as well. If we can potentially double the size of the deposit, just drilling it off at depth, it's a great opportunity. Like, as you can see there, that red arrow is pointing that, we have near vertical lenses, and then it just stops at depth. It just stops the mineralization. And there's a couple holes that were drilled historically that had great intercepts, and that's where we think we can easily add tonnage to this deposit. The other opportunities, if you look on the left-hand side there, you can see that red dot up there. That was 6.5 meters, 20 feet of almost 7% zinc, right near surface, right at surface. So there's a question: fantastic. How did it get there? So, is it from that same depth source, and is there another lens right there? I mean, that's the real blue sky potential here, is that VMS deposits are known for being in clusters. So when you find one, you often find half a dozen in that area. And we have surface IP work and geophysics work that point that there are multiple lenses here. So we look at that drill hole off to the left there and say, okay, well, that came from somewhere. So our plan is to that's what I would call blue sky potential. But if we're able to identify hopefully another lens or two over there, then all of a sudden you're talking multiples of the size of this deposit. Right. And then that would start getting into, the bigger boys would start paying attention to this project.
Yeah. So now that you mentioned that, why don't we talk a little bit about your share structure? I know you came in and took over the company, but who else has invested in you?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a heavy investment by not only me, but my fellow directors. Between the three of us, we own 20% of the company. We have what I would call one kind of retail base that owns about another 20%. So between, call it half a dozen people, there's roughly 40% of the company is within our ownership group. And then the balance is largely in the float.
Okay. And you guys are trading on the Toronto Stock Exchange Venture under Moon, and I think you're also trading on the OTCs here in the US. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a pink sheet quotation in the US. It's BMOOF.
Okay. And I wanted to show this because this might be the most interesting from an investor perspective. Slide in the deck is talking about comparative value. Maybe you can speak to this slide a little bit.
Sure. I mean, I think, there's obviously, we believe we are undervalued, as I think most companies do, but we think this slide, shows it in terms of evaluation per metric ton of zinc. You can see that Blue Moon is at the bottom, amongst all our peers. Then if you look at it on the chart on the left, you can see that in terms of grade, we're kind of middle of the pack. But what I think really, what you should really look even beyond these things is that unlike many of our peer groups, we're in an area where there's infrastructure around us. So, I mean, that's one of the biggest competitive advantages to this project is, there's a highway running, within 2 miles of the project. You can, drive right up to site in 2 minutes off a highway. There's a hydroelectrical facility a couple miles away with a power line that runs right through the project. There's communities, call it 45 minutes in either direction, which would house your workforce. So, we don't need to build highways, railways, airports, or communities. They're all there. All we have to worry about is building the facility itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a real competitive advantage when, all we have to worry about is the mine infrastructure itself. Everything else is in place. Whereas many of our peer groups, they're in remote locations. They need to spend $1 billion or $2 billion to get all the infrastructure in place. They may be bigger and higher grade, but they don't, their likelihood of getting through into the next level, I would say, is a little bit rougher than our path.
Okay. So for investors who may be interested in you, can you tell them what your next steps are in your exploration path, and maybe just a general idea when you guys may be going to production?
Yeah, so our next steps is definitely drilling. We believe that the best value add for this project is through the drill bit. As I mentioned, we want to expand the current resource. We think there's expansion opportunities, which is a little bit more low-hanging fruit. The big potential is to drill it off at depth. We have a couple of holes that are at depth from historical drilling. We think by adding to that, at a certain point, we're going to be able to migrate that resource hopefully into an inferred resource and being able to talk about it and put it on paper. And then the real blue sky is kind of that red dot I showed you off on the left. And that's, hey, there's other lenses here. We just need to find them. And, we want to put some holes in that category of some high impact exploration that could be a game changer for this asset.
Okay. So far, we've been talking about the California asset. I know you have one up in Canada. Let me share a screen on the Java property and talk just a moment about what that is and what advantage you have of having multiple locations and not just being a single resource company.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate, the Blue Moon asset and the Java property are both legacy assets of Boliden. So this is formerly Boliden North America until they exited North America. So this is the second package. It's also a VMS deposit, meaning polymetallic. It's also got, the main elements there of zinc, copper, gold, and silver. What's exciting about this project is it's on a belt, and it's on one side of the belt. The other side of the belt is a Glencore project, and Glencore is one of the largest mining companies in the world. Mm-hmm. And the asset that Glencore has, it's at pre-feasibility stage, and so it's more advanced stage. They have 80 million tons. It's just a massive deposit. It's something like almost 400 million ounces of silver. It is northern Canada, so it is a higher infrastructure spend. This is what I was mentioning before. They need to find out how to get power, access in terms of transportation, port, stuff like that. So it is a bigger project, mm-hmm. but it's a bigger piece of the pie, but may take a little bit longer. In our view, is someone's going to want to develop this, and we're sitting there right alongside of it. So we think it's a great secondary project for us, and but we believe the primary usage of our short-term funds should be on Blue Moon as it's near term. This is a little bit longer term, but exciting nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. I think this has been a great one to bring to the channel. We often talk about gold and silver, but there's so many other metals out there that are so important. And I think given what's going to happen in the Asian side of the economy and the demand for things like copper, lead, zinc, and a lot of the base metals, really having some diversity in the portfolio is a good idea. So I've been fascinated by this project. Patrick, if investors want to find you and have additional questions, how would they reach out to you?
Yeah, I think if you go to our website, so bluemoonmining.com, and on there you'll find our presentation information. Also, you can go to the contacts page, and that'll have my phone number, my email address. Please reach out to me directly with any questions you may have. I'll be happy to answer it as the largest shareholder of the company.
Fantastic, Patrick. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Robert.